All right, let's take a look here. Titanic tourist submersible destroyed. How it happened. This is going to be the thing that now that it's done with, this is going to be the next thing that everyone is trying to figure out, what it is. Now, they're already saying that the Navy early on, the same day that went missing, they heard an implosion via some super secret, tech that the Navy has, which makes sense. I figured that the Navy would have known what had happened with this whole thing pretty quickly because they have the technology. I mean, the Navy uses these very advanced sonar systems because they're tracking Russian submarines. That's one of the biggest things that goes on that not many people know about are the submarine kind of like war games, where Russians are trying to track U.S. nuclear subs and U.S. nuclear subs are trying to track Russian subs. And it's an ongoing game in the ocean. I mean, they've made movies about it, like Hunt for Red October and a few other movies. But I say that to say that they have the tech. So I knew, as someone that was in the service in the Marine Corps and all that stuff, like I knew they had the tech. So, and it turns out they knew and they heard the implosion early on.
This afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern, we got the news everyone was dreading.
In consultation with experts from within the Unified Command, the debris is consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber.
Wow.
Upon this determination, we immediately notified the families.
That's the man heading the multinational task force that has spent the last 4 days searching round the clock for the 5 people on board the Titan submersible. They've used planes, ships, a submarine, subsea robots, even remote-operated vehicles capable of descending all the way to the ocean floor, to the wreck of the Titanic itself.
I'm betting you that it was the naval submarines that were picking up the sounds and did the initial report. I'd be shocked if it wasn't the subs that picked it up and all that stuff. Gambler, what's up? Said, can people just leave the Titanic alone? Yeah, you know what? Honestly, my thoughts on that is it went down. That was a massive loss of life in that one vessel. And, I'm not someone that's overly into supernatural stuff, but something about that right there just makes me feel like it's bad juju, because there's such a mass loss of life there and so much tragedy and pain in that one thing. I just, there's probably just bad juju in there. I wouldn't want to go down there, but there are many people in this world that have an excessive amount of money that want to do some very extreme things. And, listen, this could have easily been a story of 5 people that went, parachuting, skydiving, and the chutes didn't deploy, right? Any number of extreme sports or they call this extreme tourism, could have led to this, right? Imagine if it was a shuttle that it took people into space to orbit around the world one time, and then you come back down for a trip, it could have happened there. It's just the nature of when we're pushing the limits of what we can do in our technology, and this is a result of it. It's a sad one, but it's a reality.
The Titan was headed, but after an expensive, exhausting, and hopeful search, it is now believed the Titan was destroyed. Here's how it happened.
Let's see. I'm willing to bet that all of these screws here, right, you see here are probably just over-the-counter screws that he bought at Home Depot. They talked about how the washers and nuts they just got from a hardware store. So this isn't, military-grade machining. They used a carbon fiber hull, which is something that's never really done before, to my understanding. There's a lot of things here that are just problematic. Probably contributed to this.
Essentially, we found 5 different major pieces of debris that told us that it was the remains of the Titan.
According to the U.S. Coast Guard, an ROV, a remote-operated vehicle, was able to scour the ocean floor near the Titanic wreckage. A few hundred meters away, they found this.
The initial thing we found was the nose cone, which was outside of the pressure hull.
That was clue number 1.
Oof.
Soon after, they found a large debris field where they found other components. They analyzed what they looked like, compared them to the design specs of the Titan submersible, and it seemed like a match.
Shortly thereafter, we found a second smaller debris field. Within that debris field, we found the other end of the pressure hull, the aft end bell, which was basically comprised of the totality of that pressure vessel.
So here's my question, right? He's saying that we found it all, right? It's all blown to pieces. At that depth, I'm curious as to, are there bodies anywhere? Now, I don't even know if they can retrieve them. What happens to the body at that depth? If it imploded, does that mean the body disintegrates? You know, will they find any kind of remains they can bring back so the families can do some kind of a burial? I'm really curious about that aspect of it all. And then, of course, you know, obviously, if the bodies are just down there in the water, there's, you know, fish and other creatures out there that probably are on, you know, already disposing of whatever's left. You know, there's, if we're going to be real about it, you know.
It was all consistent with the components used to build the Titan, but they also think the debris tells them something about how the Titan went down. Not a slow, steady leak, but rather a violent, sudden change in pressure.
This is a incredibly unforgiving environment down there on the seafloor, and the debris is consistent with a catastrophic implosion of the vessel.
A catastrophic implosion is what can happen when you are subjected to the incredible pressure of being so deep underwater. You know, the Titan wreckage is about 13,000 feet below sea level.
Crazy.
When you're that far down, the forces acting on the hull of the ship, many thousands of pounds per square inch. You know, I've heard it compared to having the equivalent of an Empire State Building crushing you from all sides.
We've taken a regular styrofoam coffee cup, and that's then strapped to the outside of the submersible in a net bag. And when we eventually come up topside and recovered, the actual same coffee cup is basically a that size.
Yo, that's crazy. Yo, that's crazy. That thing packed it down.
The big question right now is how such a catastrophic implosion could have happened. You know, it was an experimental sub. That was literally written on the death waiver passengers have to sign to be allowed on board. And a lot has been said about the cavalier attitude that the company's CEO had when it came to safety, innovation, and pushing the envelope with, you know, new materials never before used in a sub of this kind. But
you know, it might be to the CEO's benefit that he was in there and is no longer here, because if he was still alive today, you know, I mean, the company's going to get sued, but he probably avoided even further, maybe criminal action, you know, or anything like that. That, you know, and then the same thing too, right? If you are going on something like this and they're clearly saying it's experimental, it's not to say that they're not going to get sued. The families are going to definitely sue in civil court and all that stuff. But, you know, man, like you're also, you know, on a personal responsibility level, it says it's experimental. This is, yeah, whew, man, you know, you put yourself in that spot for something like this to happen, to be quite honest. This wasn't the first trip, so what was different? You know, who knows? Any number of things. The hull could have just been worn out from previous trips. If they did a shoddy repair on it, if they didn't do maintenance on it. I mean, there could be so many things that led up to why this time around it imploded. Who knows? And the reality is I doubt we will ever know. They might be able to scavenge and grab some of the bigger parts from the debris, but I seriously doubt they get enough of it back to piece it all, or at least enough of it together where they can get any meaningful kind of assessment as to what led to the implosion. I just don't believe that's going to be the case. It's just going to be unsolved. And a lot of it, I think, is going to end up just being speculation, much like what we're seeing in this video.
we also learned something from this afternoon's news conference that tells us about the timing of the implosion. You know, you'll recall the Titan lost contact with its mothership on the surface partway through its descent. This was on Sunday morning. They should have returned by the afternoon, but didn't. And it was only that evening the Coast Guard was alerted. Then it was roughly another day until a Canadian plane would arrive, dropping sonar buoys into the water. You can think of those like underwater microphones. It gave search teams listening capability. So here's the thing. There's this period between Sunday and Monday where nobody had any clue what was going on down there. And the suggestion seems to be from the Coast Guard, that's when the implosion likely happened.
This was a catastrophic implosion of the vessel, which would have generated a significant broadband sound down there that the sonar buoys would have picked up.
They would have heard the implosion if it had happened while their sonar buoys were deployed, but they heard nothing. I mention this because it tells us something about what the crew's final moments might have been like. You see, the great fear here was that death would have been slow and unbearable.
Right.
Imagine
that's essentially why this story was so huge, because all of us were led to believe via the press briefings that if they were down there, if they were still stuck, they were running on against the clock because of the air situation. They had 96 hours of air capacity and oxygen rather, and if that expired, before they were rescued, they were essentially going to suffocate to death, which would be a slow, miserable death. And that is what captivated everyone, because everyone was thinking about, what would I do in that situation? Everyone was imagining these 5 people in there and playing out scenarios of like, would it be like a Hunger Games? Would someone mark off everyone else just so they have more air to themselves? Would they all be, chilling? Would someone be panicking? We all thought all of these different scenarios and like, what would it be like to be in that sub, stuck there, knowing time is ticking away until you're done. It's very much like a Hollywood movie. There's plenty of movies that they've made that are essentially like this, right? Where it's a group of people stuck in, fighting against time and some crazy situation or against Mother Nature. And that's why I think this was such a captivating, story and sad story, to be honest with you. But it turns out though that they heard the implosion, but it just doesn't make sense why they led us to believe ever since Monday until now Thursday, as we're talking about this, for these 4 days, they led us to believe that there was still a good chance they were alive, when in actuality, as the press briefings have gone on, they kind of already suspected that it was done from Sunday to Monday.
You're trapped all alone in a 22-foot hunk of carbon fiber. It's cold because sunlight can't penetrate the water. There's limited food, limited water to drink, only a single porthole that you can't even look through without powering the ship's lights because it's pitch black on the other side, and you're running out of oxygen. Perhaps a silver lining in all of this is that in the case of a violent implosion, death would have been instantaneous.
On behalf of the United States Coast Guard and the entire Unified Command, I offer my deepest condolences to the families. I can only imagine what this has been like for them, and I hope that this discovery provides some solace during this difficult time.
On board the Titan, Hamish Harding, a British billionaire explorer, Paul-Henri Nargeolet, a renowned French diver, Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman, 2 members of one of Pakistan's wealthiest families, and Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate Expeditions, the company behind this doomed voyage, finding its final resting place not far from where the Titanic itself sank more than 100 years ago.
Damn, bro. It's just so crazy. That place is bad juju. Don't go to the Titanic. I would never, even if they developed the subs that are good to go and it was as reliable as our airline industry is, which are pretty reliable, right? Like they're, it's very rare for aircraft to crash and stuff, especially when you compare them to like cars, right? So anyway, imagine that these submarines that they build for adventuring and exploration stuff like tourism. Imagine they're at the same like safety level as aircraft. I still wouldn't go down in the water. You know what I mean? I still wouldn't go down in the water. That is just, it's a bit crazy. And I guess logically speaking, it's no different than going in the air. You're up that high, you got pressure as well. If something happens, you're just boosh. You know what I mean? Like, so, but I think that we've managed to get a grip on our aviation, transportation, and aircraft more than what we're doing in the maritime field.